I guess it's true. Throwing in a few dirty slasher elements can make just about anything better. So Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth tells the story of an investigative journalist looking into a mysterious death, all the while Pinhead is manipulating people to try to escape his confinement. Welcome back to the Hellraiser review series, people. If you're wondering why my hairstyle and facial features and beard and everything looks different in every video, I actually recorded the first 4 of these videos 2 months ago when I was home with COVID, and unfortunately my data got corrupted for half of the Hellraiser review and all of the Hellraiser 3 review. So after 4, you'll see current me for the rest of this franchise, so just to avoid that question. Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth is a movie that I have seen one time before. It's one of 5 movies in this franchise that I had seen previous to doing this review series, and this one was one that I remember being a little bit mixed on, because there was elements to it that I thought were really cool and was really different and a little bit more streamlined, and there was other elements to it that felt like very straight to DVD, felt a little bit cheap, felt a little trashy. And so I was really curious to rewatch this one in succession with all of the other movies and see where it stacks along the way.
Shall we begin?
So starting off with the positives for Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth, I thought that this was actually a pretty cool story for a follow-up to the first 2 films. You know, the first 2 are very much kind of an isolated story. They tie right into each other. They have the same characters, and you could almost view them as a double feature and you wouldn't miss a beat. Hellraiser 3 is the first one in this franchise that focuses more on an isolated story and isn't necessarily connected to the other films aside from Pinhead and the Cenobites. And the way that they follow it up with Pinhead basically dying in Hellraiser 2 due to the Leviathan Doctor and him being confined into this little spinning statuette, I thought it was a cool place to find him still confined there and still being able to manipulate people and trying to replicate some of the events of the first 2 films as far as bringing sacrifices and bringing blood and skin and flesh so that he can eventually embody a physical embodiment again. That was a pretty neat direction and a pretty neat way to explain that final scene in 2 where you see the little spinning statue again. What does that mean? What's that going to play into things? And I also thought for the storyline regarding our main character here, this investigative journalist, that was also a pretty decent story to go along too, where somebody gets wheeled into the ER, they've got these floating chains and electricity and just dies mysteriously, and she's like, what the fuck is this? If I can figure out what the hell that is, this is going to make my career. And that does make sense, because the more that Hellraiser shit starts to bleed into real life, that would raise a lot of questions. So as far as the setup and as far as the story and the plot of this third film, I thought it had a pretty good story going for it. Of course, one of the main things that this movie is known for is that sweet carnage candy, baby. There's a lot of carnage in this movie. There's a lot of blood, there's a lot of gore, there's a lot of kills. I think most kills, most carnage is in this film than any of the rest of this franchise. For a franchise that's known for pain and flesh and ripping and tearing, most of it is in this third film because they kind of take a bit of a slasher approach in that third act. Once Pinhead is loose, once he's turning people into Cenobites, it almost turns into Carrie for a while, where people are locked into this nightclub and you just got chains and blades and stuff flying everywhere, and there is just meat and blood and splatters galore all throughout the rest of the runtime. And if you're here for slasher elements, if maybe you were missing some of that in the first 2 Hellraiser movies, if you were a carnage candy whore, if you're a gore hound, this movie is the one for you. And certainly the first 2 films were really going for something that was a lot more fantastical and mythic and trying to go a little bit deeper than just the kills, but kind of scaling back, going a little more bare bones, throwing a little bit of those dirty slasher elements into this film. I think it made it more entertaining than some of the other films in this franchise, to the point where this one is one of the more rewatchable Hellraiser sequels for sure. Another thing that this one really had going for it, you could probably say that Hellraiser 3 has some of the best, if not the best, Pinhead lines. I mean, this is a character that is completely wasted in this entire franchise. I mean, he's utilized great in the first film, he's utilized pretty decent in 2, he's utilized really well in 3, after that, they really don't know what the hell to do with Pinhead. So as a whole, he's a complete waste of a horror icon. But he is really the star that shines in Hellraiser 3. All of his kind of vocal manipulations of these characters, trying to get them on his side, and even to the point where he finally gets out and he's let loose. I mean, there's a great scene in a church where he reenacts the whole crucifixion.
I am the way.
There's just so much scenery chewing out of Doug Bradley in this film that if you're there for Pinhead, this is one of the very few Hellraiser movies that will deliver that character in a fun way.
This is my body. This is my blood. Happy are they who come to my supper.
And my final positive, of course, I'm a metalhead. I got to give a shout out to Armored Saint that is in the beginning of this movie. In the nightclub, it's a metal band. I love John Bush, mostly from his era in Anthrax. A lot of you watching this could probably care less. You don't even know who the hell Armored Saint is, but anytime I see a band that I know and that I like show up in a movie, especially a horror movie, it always gives them at least half a star, just for charming me on that level, so sue me. Now moving on to the negatives, the acting pretty much all around here, except for Doug Bradley, is pretty atrocious. I mean, you can definitely tell you're getting into straight-to-video territory here. There's nobody that stands out. There's nobody that's like a fun actor that you're like, hey, this is where they got their start. No wonder they turned into a star. There's nobody like that here. Everybody pretty much is just, they know what type of movie that they're in. They're putting forth the minimum amount of effort to really glare on screen above the Cenobites, and nobody really succeeds. And one of the main casualties of that is your main character, this investigative journalist. As a story, I like the way that they set her up. I like the way that they have her different character relationships, to where she brings in this troubled girl and she's trying to help her and trying to almost protect her from everything that's going on. And then eventually that leads to people that she knows and loves, including this girl that she's trying to help turn into Cenobites by the third act. And now she's not only running from the main threat of the movie, but she's also running from people that were kind of her saving grace. And she goes along a nice character arc, but the character herself, mostly because of the performance, is an incredibly boring character. There is no person that's ever going to watch this movie and say, damn, I wish that character would come back in Hellraiser 12 because she was great. No, she's boring as fuck. As soon as she's on screen and all you know is that she's like, oh, I got to get farther in my career, and that's just the only one level performance you get out of this woman throughout the entire movie, it doesn't really go anywhere. Even when they try to get her to be emotional and they involve like the death of her father and this whole trick that Pinhead is trying to play on her in the third act, where she shows himself as her father, just the reaction that she gives is not trying all that hard. So of course, a lot of people watch a movie like this, you're not going in for great acting, you're not going in for these memorable performances, but they've certainly dropped since the first two films. But the main issue that I had with this movie is that the third act really drags. Now, once all the carnage starts happening, the third act really ramps up, and it's like Carrie, and people are getting decimated, and you got Cenobites walking the streets, and they're chasing the main character, and they all have really cool designs, and they all have this different little vibe to them about how they're going to take out this character, and all of that's cool, and then that gets resolved. And then it goes back to her thinking that she has demolished Pinhead, and then that doesn't quite get resolved. And there's this whole subplot going on with the human side of Pinhead that Doug Bradley is playing, where he's got his own plot, and he's trying to work with the main character to snare this trap for Pinhead so that they can fight and he can take over his soul once again. And then that doesn't quite get resolved. And then you get the whole scene where he's pretending to be her father, and then it turns out to be Pinhead, and then regular Doug Bradley shows up, and then that doesn't quite get resolved. And then all the way to the end where she finally throws the lament configuration into this construction site, and we get this scene where the building that was built there is wallpapered in lament configuration graffiti everywhere. The third act just goes on and on and on. It feels like it has about 8 different endings. And even though it's exciting through part of it, and that's certainly one of the more exciting parts of the movie, and certainly where the most action is, it just felt like they could have spread those plot lines a little bit more throughout the movie, or at least picked a couple of them and not try to do every single one of them, because it just goes and goes and goes, like the fucking Energizer Bunny. But overall, guys, this movie's not really shooting for the stars. I think that it doesn't have near the creativity or near the ambition of the second film, but I think that I actually prefer this one just because I'm a slasher guy, and this one's a little bit easier to digest, a little bit easier to watch. I don't know if I'm gonna be on an island with that one, but overall, it's an okay follow-up to Hellraiser, but it is a very rewatchable follow-up to Hellraiser, which is more than I'm going to be able to say for pretty much any of these. So if you're a Hellraiser fan and you want to see a more violent, more brutal, and more slasher-filled fun time in this franchise, Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth has that gift wrapped for you. So check this thing out online and stream it. So what do you guys think of Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth? Are you a fan of this sequel? Do you like the more basic slasher element that we get in the third act of this, or do you feel like they lost what Hellraiser was and you hate the direction that they went in this movie? Well, let me know down below. I'm sure this is a very divisive chapter in the franchise. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're a Hellraiser fan. I'm going through the entire franchise, all of the movies, gonna do a ranking at the end of it, and we got a couple more fun review series coming this month as well, so be sure not to miss any of that. And please remember, as always, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.